This all started when I was 17. I'm 21 now, and I've come a long way. But back then, life was rough. My relationship with my dad was fragile at best, more like walking on a tightrope than a father-daughter bond. My stepsister, Riley, who was 20 at the time, was the golden child in our blended family. Meanwhile, I was the outsider, always cautious, never feeling secure in my own home. Riley had this inexplicable hatred for me. I don't know what I did to deserve it, but she seemed to make it her personal mission to make my life as miserable as possible. If that wasn't enough, her mother, my stepmother, Diane, would not only cheer her on, but sometimes even join in. And my dad? He never stood up for me. He would just side with Diane, no matter how ridiculous her claims were. It was like being in a court where the jury was already bought. I tried to defend myself at first, but after countless arguments, I realized no one in that house cared about what I had to say. I started keeping to myself, retreating into my own little bubble to avoid their wrath. But somehow my silence seemed to provoke Riley even more. She ramped up her antics, and every day felt like a new battle. The turning point came when my dad's prized watch went missing. It wasn't just any watch. It was his favorite possession, and he treated it like a family heirloom. I didn't even know it was gone until I came home from school one day to find my dad raging, Diane glaring at me like I was dirt, and Riley acting like the innocent angel she wasn't. I knew something was up, but I had no idea what. Then Diane dropped the bombshell. She accused me of stealing the watch. According to her, my weird behavior recently was proof that I was desperate for attention and had taken it. Riley, of course, backed her up, claiming she had seen me snooping around Dad's room. For context, the only weird behavior I'd been displaying was crying over the loss of my cat, Whiskers, who had been my companion since I was 3 years old. He had been my rock during my parents' divorce and the only constant in my chaotic life. I wasn't acting out for attention. I was grieving. Riley, in her usual heartless fashion, had taken it upon herself to mock me for being upset. She'd crack jokes about how the house felt so much better without my ugly creature around. My dad, instead of shutting her down, would tell me to stop being emotional. It was a slap in the face every time. So when I was accused of stealing the watch, I was completely blindsided. I didn't even know it was missing. I tried to defend myself, but my words fell on deaf ears. My dad didn't ask me a single question. He just went on a tirade about how I was just like my mom, a phrase he used whenever he wanted to insult me. Then he said the unthinkable. I had to leave. That was it. At 17, I was kicked out of the house with no plan and nowhere to go. My only option was to call my mom, who was dealing with her own struggles. She took me in, and for the next 4 years, I didn't hear a word from my dad. Not one call, not one text. I tried reaching out a few times, desperate to clear my name, but he never responded. Despite the heartbreak, I tried to move on. My mom wasn't in the best mental state, but in a strange way, being there for her helped me focus on something other than my own pain. I graduated high school and eventually college, but my dad wasn't there for either milestone. It hurt, but over time, the pain dulled. Fast forward to a few weeks ago. My grandpa turned 75, and he invited me to his birthday celebration at a farmhouse he had rented. Grandpa and I had always been close. He was my rock during the hardest times. Even though he couldn't take me in when Dad kicked me out, he supported me financially and emotionally. So, despite knowing that my dad, Diane, and Riley would be there, I couldn't say no to Grandpa. When I walked into the party, the tension hit me like a wave. Seeing my dad sitting with Diane and Riley, acting like nothing had ever happened, made my stomach churn. I kept my distance, sticking to other relatives and avoiding any interaction with them. But every time I glanced their way, I felt a lump in my throat. Little did I know, that day would change everything. I was doing my best to get through the party. Grandpa deserved a great day, and I didn't want to ruin it by dredging up old drama. So I stayed with the cousins I was close to and avoided my dad, Diane, and Riley like the plague. Riley, for her part, didn't even look at me. Diane had this smug, triumphant smirk that made my blood boil, but I tried to ignore it. Deep down, I felt a storm brewing. Every time I caught sight of my dad, I had to fight back tears. 4 years of silence, betrayal, and rejection welled up inside me, but I kept it together. Grandpa was the only reason I was there, and I wasn't going to let them ruin my time with him. Then, comma. The unexpected happened. The party was in full swing when someone suggested Grandpa make a toast. Everyone started cheering and clapping, encouraging him to say a few words. Grandpa, never one to shy away from the spotlight, stood up with a wide grin. He started by thanking everyone for coming and talked about how blessed he was to celebrate this milestone surrounded by family and friends. His words were heartfelt, and for a moment, I forgot about the tension. But then he shifted gears. Out of nowhere, Grandpa mentioned my dad's missing watch. My heart stopped. He said he had recently discovered the truth about what had happened to it. The room went completely silent. Everyone stared at Grandpa, waiting for him to continue. My chest tightened as he began to explain. Grandpa had been catching up with an old friend who owned a pawn shop. During their conversation, the watch came up, and his friend mentioned that someone had sold a very similar one to his shop a few years back. Grandpa, curious, showed him a picture of the watch. Sure enough, the friend recognized it immediately. He even had records of the transaction, including the name and ID of the person who sold it. Riley. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My mind raced as Grandpa kept talking. He explained that his friend had remembered Riley because she had been visibly panicked when she came to sell the watch. Apparently, she had even confessed to the pawn shop owner that she needed the money to pay for car repairs after she had been in a minor accident while drunk. It didn't end there. Grandpa revealed that Riley had admitted to her plan. She and Diane would concoct a story to pin the theft on me so that Riley wouldn't face the fallout. Hearing those words made my head spin. Grandpa's friend had shared all of this with him a week before the party, and Grandpa had spent the past few days confirming the details. He debated whether to confront the family privately or wait until the party. In the end, he chose the party. He wanted the truth out in front of everyone. The silence that followed his toast was deafening. I looked around the room, trying to gauge everyone's reactions. My dad's face had gone completely pale. Riley sat frozen, like a deer caught in headlights. Diane, who always seemed to have a smug retort for everything, looked like she had seen a ghost. As for me, I didn't know how to feel. A part of me wanted to scream, another part wanted to cry, but mostly I just felt numb. 4 years of my life had been shattered because of their lies. 4 years of being cast out, alienated, and treated like I didn't matter. And now, the truth was finally out. But it didn't bring the relief I thought it would. I didn't stick around for the fallout. As soon as Grandpa finished his toast, I quietly left the party. I couldn't handle hearing the excuses, the apologizes, or whatever explanations they were about to come up with. I needed time to process everything on my own. The next morning, Grandpa came to see me. He apologized for bringing everything up in such a public way, worried that he might have made things worse for me. But I assured him I was grateful. For the first time in years, someone had stood up for me. Someone had cared enough to clear my name. We talked for hours, and Grandpa encouraged me to take my time before deciding what to do next. He promised that no matter what happened with my dad or the rest of the family, he would always have my back. But I was left with a dilemma. My dad had been blowing up my phone since the party. At first, his messages were full of apologies and pleas for forgiveness. But as the days went on, they started to shift. He accused me of manipulating Grandpa and ruining his relationship with Diane and Riley. It was like he couldn't decide whether to beg or blame me. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to hear him out, to see if he was genuinely sorry. But another part of me couldn't forget how easily he had cast me aside and how little he had fought for me when I needed him most. Could I ever trust him again? And even if I could, did I want to? After a lot of back and forth with myself, I decided to meet with my dad. I wasn't sure why I agreed. Maybe I wanted closure, or maybe there was still a tiny part of me that hoped he'd finally take responsibility. Whatever the reason, I texted him back and suggested meeting at a neutral spot, a little cafe we used to go to when I was younger. The moment I walked in and saw him sitting there, fidgeting nervously, my emotions hit me like a freight train. For a split second, I thought maybe this meeting could lead to something better, that somehow we could mend the broken pieces, but that feeling didn't last long. He started by apologize. He said he knew he had messed up and was sorry for believing Diane and Riley without giving me a chance to explain. He admitted he had failed as a father and regretted how everything had turned out. At first, I felt myself softening. For the first time in years, I thought we might be able to rebuild something. But then he kept talking. He went on about how much pressure he'd been under back then, how he didn't know who to believe, and how Diane and Riley had been so convincing. I could feel my guard going back up. Yes, I could understand being overwhelmed, but that didn't excuse him for abandoning me. He had chosen their lies over his own daughter without a second thought. Then he dropped a bombshell. He accused me of manipulating Grandpa. He said he wasn't entirely convinced I hadn't stirred the pot to turn Grandpa against him and embarrass the family at the party. I was stunned. For a moment, I couldn't even speak. The man who claimed he wanted to make things right was now accusing me of scheming against him? I stared at him, trying to process his words. All those texts, all those calls asking for forgiveness, they suddenly felt hollow. It became painfully clear that he wasn't here to take responsibility. He was here to shift the blame, to clear his own conscience, or maybe even to guilt me into apologizing. I finally found my voice and called him out. I reminded him that he had chosen to believe Diane and Riley without ever giving me a chance to defend myself. I told him it wasn't fair to pin any of this on me when he was the one who had turned his back on me. But instead of owning up to his actions, he doubled down. He said Diane and Riley had tricked him, that he had been manipulated, and that I needed to understand that he had been under a lot of stress. Then came the line that sealed the deal for me. Family is family, and maybe it's time for you to forgive them. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Forgive them? The people who had stolen from him, lied about me, and destroyed our relationship? It was clear he still wasn't willing to hold them accountable. He was more concerned with keeping up the facade of a united family than actually repairing what had been broken. That was it for me. I stood up, looked him in the eye, and told him I didn't want to hear from him again unless he was ready to genuinely take responsibility for his actions. Then I walked out. In the days that followed, I felt a mix of relief and anger. I was relieved to finally confront him and see his true colors, but I was furious that even after everything, he still couldn't own up to what he'd done. It felt like I had been hoping for closure that would never come. To make matters worse, I found out through a cousin that Diane and Riley were already spinning the story. They were telling anyone who would listen that I was overreacting and blowing things out of proportion. Riley even had the audacity to brag that their side of the family was still sticking together while I was the one isolating myself. It was like they couldn't resist trying to rewrite history. As for my dad, he kept calling and texting, but I stopped responding. His messages went from apologetic to accusatory, blaming me and Grandpa for ruining his life. It was exhausting, and I knew I couldn't keep putting myself through the cycle of betrayal and false hope. One day, Grandpa called me over to talk. He had found something while going through old financial records that made everything even more complicated. Turns out, the missing watch was just the tip of the iceberg. Diane and Riley had been running scams for years, stealing from the family's business accounts, opening credit in my dad's name, and racking up debts he didn't even know about. Grandpa explained that Riley had left a trail of transactions that didn't add up. He had found charges for luxury items and services that my dad would never buy, nail appointments, spa treatments, expensive clothing. Then there was the fake loan Diane had taken out in my dad's name to cover Riley's reckless spending. They had been bleeding him dry for years, and he had no clue. Grandpa was furious. He had trusted my dad to manage the family legacy, but this betrayal was too much. He went straight to his lawyer and made some big decisions that would send shockwaves through the entire family. Grandpa wasn't one to sit back when someone wronged him or the family. After uncovering the scams Diane and Riley had been running, he took swift and decisive action. He met with his lawyer and made sure they could never touch another dime of family money. The first step? Disinheriting my dad entirely. It was shocking even to me. Grandpa had always been fair, even when he was angry. But this time, he wasn't holding back. He told me he had reached his limit. My dad's willingness to blindly trust Diane and Riley, even after everything came to light, was the final straw. Grandpa believed my dad had proven he wasn't responsible enough to handle the family legacy. Not only was my dad cut out of the will, but Grandpa also made sure Diane and Riley were blocked from accessing any trusts or assets. They'd assumed they'd have a cushy future funded by Grandpa's hard work, but now they were left with nothing. Grandpa even took steps to sell the house my dad had been living in, a house that technically belonged to Grandpa through a trust he controlled. When Grandpa told my dad about the changes, my dad was in disbelief. Grandpa gave him one chance. He could keep living in the house, but only if he kicked Diane and Riley out. Of course, my dad refused. Even after everything, he was still standing by the woman and daughter who had betrayed him. So Grandpa moved forward with the sale. The fallout was immediate and chaotic. Within a week, the house was on the market and Diane and Riley were scrambling. Diane, who had always prided herself on her calm, collected demeanor, had a full-blown meltdown. She screamed at the real estate agents, threatened Grandpa with lawsuits, and tried every guilt trip in the book to get my dad to fight back. But Grandpa had planned for this. Legally, there was nothing they could do. Riley wasn't any better. She begged my dad to sell his remaining personal belongings just so she could keep up with her car payments. It was almost laughable. This girl who had once mocked me for grieving my cat was now panicking because her lavish lifestyle was slipping through her fingers. For the first time, she was facing the consequences of her actions, and she didn't know how to handle it. As for Diane, she made one last desperate move. She filed for divorce. It was clear she had only been in the relationship for financial stability, and now that my dad was broke, she saw no reason to stay. She probably thought she'd get a hefty settlement. But thanks to Grandpa's quick actions, there was nothing left for her to take. Every asset had been moved out of her reach. And then there was my dad, without Diane and Riley to back him up. He was left to face the reality of his choices. He kept trying to contact me, but I didn't respond. I had made it clear during our last conversation that I wasn't interested in rebuilding a relationship unless he was ready to take full responsibility. His texts and voicemails were a roller coaster. One day he'd apologize, the next he'd lash out, blaming me for manipulating Grandpa or ruining his life. I couldn't keep putting myself through it. Every time I saw his name pop up on my phone, it was like a fresh wound. I had spent so many years hoping for his love and support, only to be met with disappointment time and time again. At some point, you have to stop holding out hope for someone to change. Meanwhile, Grandpa was my rock through all of this. He reassured me that I had done nothing wrong and reminded me that I deserved better than the treatment I'd received from my dad, Diane, and Riley. We grew even closer as we talked about the future and what my life could look like now that the toxicity was behind me. He even told me he had adjusted his will to ensure I'd be taken care of, something I never expected but deeply appreciated. Of course, Diane and Riley weren't going down without a fight. Riley had the nerve to text me, begging for help. She claimed she was under pressure from Diane the whole time and never wanted things to get so bad. She even hinted that she was struggling financially and needed support. I saw right through her. I sent her a short response. "You made your bed, now lie in it." That was the last I heard from her. I wasn't about to let her manipulate me the way she had manipulated my dad. She had stolen from him, ruined my life, and had the audacity to blame everyone but herself. If she wanted sympathy, she wasn't getting it from me. Grandpa warned me that they might try to spin the situation to make me the villain, and he was right. Through the grapevine, I heard they were telling anyone who would listen that I had orchestrated everything. Apparently, I was the spoiled granddaughter who turned Grandpa against the family for my own benefit. It was ridiculous, but at this point, I didn't care. Let them talk. I knew the truth, and so did Grandpa. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The people who had hurt me were finally facing the consequences of their actions, and I was free to focus on myself and my future. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. With people like Diane and Riley, the drama never truly stops. After all the chaos, I finally felt like I had some peace in my life. Grandpa's actions had shifted the balance of power in our family, and while the fallout was messy, it was long overdue. My dad, Diane, and Riley were facing the consequences of their actions, and I was no longer their scapegoat. But of course, it wasn't entirely over. A few weeks after the house was sold, I heard from a cousin that Diane and Riley had hit rock bottom. Without access to the family's money, They were struggling to maintain the lavish lifestyle they had grown so accustomed to. Riley had to sell her car and was now living with Diane in a small apartment. The cousin mentioned that Diane was still bitter and blaming everyone but herself, claiming Grandpa's decisions were unfair and that I had poisoned him against her. I didn't care. For years, Diane and Riley had controlled the narrative, twisting the truth to make me the villain. Now their lies were unraveling, and they were left to deal with the fallout. I didn't feel sorry for them, not even a little. My dad, on the other hand, was harder to let go of. He was still reaching out, calling and texting, trying to get me to meet him again. At first, I ignored him. After our disastrous meeting at the cafe, I didn't see the point. He wasn't ready to take responsibility, and I wasn't willing to put myself through the pain of hearing more excuses and accusations. But then something changed. His messages started to sound different, less defensive, more reflective. He told me he was living alone now, that Diane had left him, and Riley wanted nothing to do with him. He admitted he had been wrong to trust them and that he was finally starting to see the damage they had done. Not just to me, but to him and the family as a whole. I wasn't sure if I believed him. I wanted to, but after everything we'd been through, it was hard to trust that he was being sincere. Still, I decided to give it one last shot. I agreed to meet him, but this time I made it clear that I wasn't interested in apologies or excuses. I needed to see action. We met at the same cafe as before. He looked different, tired, worn out, and maybe even a little humbled. He didn't launch into a rehearsal apology or try to justify his actions this time. Instead, he listened. For the first time, he let me speak without interrupting, without defending himself, and without trying to shift the blame. I told him everything. How it felt to be kicked out, how lonely I had been, and how much it hurt to know he believed Diane and Riley over me. I told him about the years of silence, the milestones he had missed, and the pain of realizing that I didn't matter to him as much as they did. By the end, I was in tears, but I felt lighter than I had in years. He apologized again, but this time it felt genuine. He didn't try to excuse his behavior or blame anyone else. He admitted he had failed me as a father and that he wasn't sure he could ever make it right, but he wanted to try. I didn't forgive him, not yet. Forgiveness is a process, and after everything that had happened, I wasn't ready to let go of all the hurt. But I told him we could take things one step at a time. If he was willing to put in the effort, I was willing to give him the chance to rebuild our relationship. As for Grandpa, he's been my rock through it all. We've grown even closer since the family drama exploded, and he's made it clear that he wants to ensure I have a bright future. He's helped me financially and emotionally, and I honestly don't know where I'd be without him. He also warned me to be cautious with my dad. He said people can change, but it takes time, and actions speak louder than words. He reminded me that it's okay to protect my heart, and that I don't owe anyone forgiveness if they haven't earned it. His advice has been invaluable as I navigate this new chapter in my life. As for Diane and Riley, I've cut them out completely. I haven't responded to any of their attempts to reach out, and I have no intention of letting them back into my life. They made their choices, and now they're living with the consequences. I'm done letting them have power over me. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. There were times when I thought I'd never escape the pain and betrayal, but now I'm in a better place. I've learned to prioritize myself and set boundaries, and I'm finally starting to heal. The future is still uncertain, but for the first time in years, I feel hopeful. I'm focusing on my own happiness, building a life I'm proud of, and surrounding myself with people who truly care about me. My relationship with my dad is a work in progress, but it's just that, a work in progress. Whether it succeeds or not, I know I'll be okay. To everyone who's followed my story, thank you for your support, advice, and kind words. It's been a long journey, but I'm proud of where I've ended up. Here's to moving forward, one step at a time. And that's where I'll leave things. Thank you for sticking with me through this wild ride. Who knows, maybe I'll come back in a few years with an update on how life has turned out. Until then, take care of yourselves, and don't be afraid to walk away from the people who don't value you. You deserve better. Story 2. 2 weeks ago, my 29-year-old wife, Richard Rick, and her 30-year-old husband welcomed a daughter into the world. We are certainly thrilled to have our first kid. We have been really busy and are still getting used to being parents. We're both having a difficult shift, but we're doing our best. The events of the day have left us with little assistance. May, the birth of our daughter. I don't think I'll ever be able to forget it since it was one of the most horrific events in my life. I can't get over the crippling terror I had that day, not even the joy of May's birth. Without my husband's prompt assistance, I believe I would have passed away. Though I am hesitant and my judgment is affected by all these hormones and baby chores, which is why I've come to read it for guidance, I still believe that we should be a bit gentler with them because it included family and May is the first kid in the family. Please be patient with me since this narrative may be lengthy and feature many characters. Anna and Emma, Rick's two sisters, are both younger than him. Emma is 24 years old, and Anna is 28. I think there is no hostility between us, and I get along well with both of them. Since none of us get together very frequently due to our hectic work schedules, we are quite close. Even though Emma doesn't reside in the same city as us, we still make an effort to remain in touch by calling or texting each other sometimes. My mother-in-law is another significant figure in Rick's family and in this narrative. 53-year-old woman. I don't get along well with Anna and Emma, but Rachel is a very different matter. We don't precisely agree, and I genuinely believe she has an issue with everyone, not just me. She simply never stops being the greatest control freak you can think of. She wants her children to follow her every move and whim. Since she was the one who reared them after their father abandoned them, all three of them generally obey her desires. They therefore make an effort to simplify their own and her lives. Furthermore, she truly gets what she wants if someone dares to demand anything different, and the response might vary from disapproval and moping to a full-blown meltdown with tears and tantrums. I try to avoid her as much as I can since it gets hard to cope with her. Rick is aware of this. He allows me to keep my distance and handle his mother however I see fit since he knows she is difficult. Despite her tendency toward dominance, I can relate to his feelings toward her. I decided to leave things alone. She doesn't interfere in my life since she doesn't like me, which is good for everyone. But she was solely to blame for things going out of hand a few days ago. Nobody will ever be able to forgive her, in my opinion, upon May's birthday. Anna was getting married. The ceremony was quite beautiful. Furthermore, Rick's acquaintance is her husband, Jonah Mayo, a 30-year-old. About a year ago, he proposed to her, and I agreed to be a bridesmaid when Anna asked me to. But I knew I couldn't handle that, so when Rick and I learned I was pregnant, I had to beg her to ask someone else. There were just 6 months left until the wedding, nearly 6 months after the proposal. My pregnancy was 3 months along. By then, I thought she would be upset with me for leaving her in the middle, but I knew I had to put priorities first. Before telling her that I worried our relationship would be strained forever, I was really apprehensive and uneasy. However, none of it occurred, which surprised and relieved me. When I informed Anna that she had genuinely forgotten about her wedding for a time, she was ecstatic. She said, "Obviously I'll be taking care of you," when I informed her that I wouldn't be available for chores. She even thought about moving the wedding so I wouldn't miss it, which I would have if May had been born. However, for a variety of reasons, that didn't work out, and to be honest, she shouldn't have done it in the first place. Even though it ended up being a near call, she remained there for me the entire time. I didn't trouble the two sisters much during the pregnancy, which was terrifying for me, because Emma was the maid of honor, and I knew they were busy getting ready for the wedding. Nevertheless, they both came over and helped me a lot and kept in touch as much as they could. Although Anna stood by me the entire time, I feel a bit bad for not being there for her on the most significant day of her life. My mother-in-law was the only one who seemed a little annoyed by the entire situation. The wedding preparations were somewhat disrupted, and I believe she was irritated that I could no longer serve as the maid of honor. I could see her point of view, and that seemed like the only sensible explanation. But, for want of a better term, the animosity persisted. Anna may not have been the maid of honor, but she was still fine with the pregnancy. Rachel somehow began to irritate me from that moment on. But the bride wasn't even angry. It was strange, but I assumed that perhaps the hormones were making me tense, the wedding was making her tense, and all of this was simply making up stories in my mind. I did my best to ignore her, and everything was well. During the wedding, things physically and figuratively went out of hand. I was pregnant at the time, 2 weeks ago, beyond my thoughts. My belly was enormous, my feet were swollen, and I thought I might faint. However, Anna wanted me to be at the wedding, so I still wanted to go. I wanted it to be her day, so I had asked her if she wanted me to be there in advance. I informed her that I didn't want the attention to be diverted from her by the presence of a heavily pregnant woman. The bride and groom should enjoy their wedding days, and I would hate to be the one to ruin that. Anna was genuinely offended and hurt when I told her this. She claimed she couldn't believe I wouldn't go to her wedding and fill my mind with such pointless nonsense. "I don't care about attention or limelight," she remarked. Her family being there to support her on her wedding day was all she wanted. "I have to come and not worry about drama," she remarked. She meant it, and I knew it. She doesn't hold back when speaking. Had she not desired my presence, she would have told it like that. However, she did, and she made it very clear. And I felt that it was my responsibility to support her. Therefore, I knew I had to be there for her on her wedding day despite my physical discomfort. I won't tell lies. Many people were whispering, but I tried not to pay attention because I knew Anna was glad I was there. That was all I cared about at the time. I was too uneasy to notice that Rachel scowled at me the entire time and didn't engage with me very much. I simply left her alone since I lacked the energy to confront her or explain her passive-aggressive actions against me. She was free to stare as she pleased. I refused to respond to her. Then came the major episode that completely astonished and terrified everyone around me, including myself. Just before the ceremony started, I started to feel apprehensive. I had already met Anna by that point. In the hopes of feeling better, I got up and walked upstairs, intending to come back thereafter. I was unaware that Rachel was following me. I went to the restroom because I was feeling strange and sweaty, and all of a sudden my water broke. It was a real flood, and I began to fear because despite my deepest love for my daughter, she had picked the worst possible moment to come. Fortunately, I was unable to think clearly. My mother-in-law was standing in front of me. I was crouched in agony by then. We had to hurry to the hospital, so I instructed her to get my phone and contact Rick right away as she hurried up to me. After helping me up and forcing me to sit in the restroom, she lost it when I handed her my phone. "I'll make sure Rick comes in an hour," she responded. She didn't want me to take Anna's place, so she waited until the ceremony was done. I told her that I couldn't possibly tolerate this for an hour and asked if she was crazy. I attempted to get my phone from her, but she took it with her and locked me inside. So there I was, sitting on a toilet in a restroom, practically on my way to giving birth without a spouse or phone. I'm grateful that I avoided having a full-blown panic attack since I have no idea what may have occurred if I had. I stood up, walked slowly up to the door, and began hammering on it. I keep screaming, but nobody can hear me because everyone is sitting for the wedding and the restrooms are on the first level. I yelled until I could no longer be heard, but nobody arrived. I honestly thought I was going to die at that point and take my child with me. I was soaked, sweating profusely, weary and voiceless. I don't recall anything else after that. I'm not sure what transpired after I fainted from tiredness. I can't even recall how I ended up in the hospital. I simply know that I did. A few hours later, I woke up in the hospital weeping with Rick at my side. It took me a few seconds to figure out where I was and what was going on. Rick, quote, EES, tears made me think the worst. Everything came rushing back. I was locked in the bathroom by my mother-in-law. I believed I didn't make it since I was weeping. Rick let out a sigh of relief and began sobbing in my arms as soon as he realized I was awake. I felt sick to my stomach and was unsure of how to interpret it. Then, with a breath of relief, I saw the nurse enter carrying a newborn girl. Since Rick was playing me like way, I really wanted to smack him, but he insisted he wasn't. I was unconscious when he discovered me in the bathroom, so he was simply glad I was all right. I don't think I'll ever be able to forget the first time I held my baby, or that there is a finer sensation in life than that. Nothing, in my opinion, can ever compare to how I felt during those times. Since I didn't have the energy to cope with it at that moment, I'm glad Rick didn't offer me any specifics. I asked him what was going on, as I could hear some noise outside. He stated his mother-in-law wanted to come in and visit her grandchild, but she was outside. I explained everything that had transpired to him. I explained to him what she had done and how she had needlessly put our kid in risk. I also informed him that I would never permit her to be close to my daughter. She seemed lifeless to me. "I know everything," he said. She broke down and told him everything when he found me like that. I informed him that I would not forgive her simply because she had a breakdown. He chuckled and declared that he would file charges for life endangerment and that his mother was dead to him from now on. He promised to take legal action to ensure she was held accountable for her actions. His words made me feel as though a burden had been removed from my shoulders. He loves his mother, I know that. They all three do. However, after the stunt she did that may have killed my kid and myself, if Rick had picked her over me, I wasn't in the mood to forgive her. It would have ended our marriage. After then, there would be no turning back, and I secretly hoped that he would pick his mother, because she had put a lot of effort into raising children in spite of everything. Perhaps I didn't anticipate his defending me in such a manner. However, I have no complaints. It has, if anything, increased my affection for him, if it is feasible at all. He told me the wedding went well when I inquired how it went. In order to come see us, Emma and Anna were waiting for him to call. He chuckled when I inquired whether Anna was upset, telling me that I didn't need to be concerned about her at all. She has been smiling with happiness and pride, saying that the birth of May was the greatest present she could have had, and that her entire family attended the wedding. When he said it to me, I was crying, and I advised him to give them a call right away. Jonah, Emma, and Anna joined me at the hospital in a matter of minutes. The finest aspect? Jonah and Anna were still dressed for their wedding, and Anna said that she couldn't resist the opportunity to snap a wedding photo with her niece. It was such a touching moment that I burst into tears. I apologized to Anna for spoiling her day after the photo. "I was looking at it all wrong," she replied, giving me a hug. I had brightened her day. I informed her about my mother-in-law's actions. The only thing I did wrong, according to Anna, was not alerting them sooner after we announced the pregnancy. They might have been able to end her drama. Emma added that any amount of trouble was okay as long as I was safe, so I informed her I didn't want to start any problems. That's when I realized they loved me like family, and I'm crying as I write this. To them, I was more than simply Rick's wife. I belonged to the family. One of the greatest women I've ever met is Anna. She's so content and safe. It makes sense why she is in her current position. How Rachel is so different from her kids is beyond me. They seem to have recognized it was not what they wanted to be after seeing her. I don't care that it's strange. It was lovely. Anna had informed her on her way in that she would ensure Rick and I filed charges, but it appeared that the mother-in-law was still outside. I didn't want my mother-in-law close to me, but she wanted to come in and meet May. "We must protect ourselves from her," Anna remarked. Feeling that she hadn't addressed her mother's overprotective tendencies or made it apparent that she didn't mind my pregnancy, Anna apologized to me. Perhaps the situation might have been prevented if she had, she claimed. I assured her that she was not at blame because she had given me a sense of security. When I was discharged, Rick was outside chatting with my mother-in-law, and 2 or 3 days later he came home with me. Rick informed me about his conversation with his mother-in-law. He said that nothing would alter the fact that he had told her he would be filing charges and that she may do so. He also informed her that she would never be permitted to be in May's life. In every way, she was not her grandma. She decided to risk my life and the lives of my pregnant kid for a perceived offense that didn't even bother her. Additionally, he stated that the amount of money he had been providing to her mother-in-law, who was living off of Rick's and Emma's money, would be significantly diminished. She broke down in tears at that point, claiming she didn't deserve this because she had sacrificed her entire life for the children. Rick informed her that although he was aware of and grateful for everything she had done for them, she did not have authority over their life. He said that she was at fault and that he had spent years being disregarded or using justifications for everything she did, but that was no longer the case. Given that Anna never had any issues, she needed to understand that she had crossed a significant line and demonstrated that she was unsafe to be around. As a mother, Rachel claimed she knew Anna didn't want me there to take center stage, but Anna overheard and attacked her. Therefore, we are definitely moving forward with the lawsuit. But because I have a newborn to look after and can't be bothered with this drama, Rick will take care of it. "I'll take care of it," Rick responded. The siblings no longer want to speak with her. Emma only speaks to her when it's absolutely necessary, and Anna has shut her off entirely. and it's clear that Rick and I don't communicate. Mother-in-law probably didn't expect this, and perhaps she really did want to keep Anna safe. No matter how twisted it sounds. I'm not standing up for her. Not at all. But because everything went so wrong, I still feel sorry for her. It feels terrible and horrible to me now, and I'm wondering whether they should speak it out with her. Maybe I'm not thinking clearly, but I'm not sure. I'm certain that Rick will lose it if I bring this up to him. He can't even look at her at the moment since he is so mad with her. This isn't what I expected, yet here we are. Revise one thoroughly, and any reconciliation will never be possible again. I realize it's been a while since I last posted, but I recently became a mother. I've been busy keeping myself and my child alive. Fortunately, May will be 8 weeks old in a few days, and we are all quite happy about it. Jonah and Anna have been really helpful to Rick and myself. Emma had to return to work nearly every day to answer calls. Everyone's eyes are actually brightened by May. They swoon over her, and her photos are all over the group chat. The mother-in-law has not been contacted. I persuaded Rick that filing charges would be pointless since we already had too much on our plate. Since neither of us had the energy for anything else, Rick reluctantly consented. Our mother-in-law seemed appreciative when we informed her last week. That woman is truly insane, and last week she revealed her actual nature to everyone, which is why I say she emerged. Rick and I were awakened by a loud knock on the door at approximately 1 in the morning last week. While Rick went to unlock the door, I fled and hid with May because I believed it was a robbery. Shouting could be heard, but I was afraid to come out for fear of waking up. My mother-in-law turned, revealed to be the culprit, and Rick said that she was acting strangely. She said that we couldn't keep her away and that she wanted to see me. Rick said that in order to get her to back off, he had to threaten her with the police. She was attempting to break in. Since everyone needed to know if something was wrong with her, we informed Anna and Emma right away. To be honest, it was for nothing, but we were worried. She texted us unsettlingly the next day. She began by claiming that we were punishing her since her sole transgression was being a mother, and that we were being cruel and horrible to her by denying her access to me. More theatrical gibberish was added, and her text eventually grew increasingly erratic. She claimed to be burdened with parenting 3 children and to feel compelled to prioritize one child over another at all times. May didn't want me to ruin Anna's birthday celebration. Conveniently, she failed to remember that May was actually a fetus, and Anna had repeatedly said that she had no problem with the pregnancy and wedding taking place simultaneously. This portion I still understood. The next thing she said startled me. She expressed concern that she wouldn't be as significant to her children now that May was in our life. She assumed Anna would be upset when I told her I was pregnant, since that's how a typical woman would feel. She didn't like it, though, when she realized that we were all thrilled about the wedding and the pregnancy. In essence, she was expressing her disapproval of the fact that we were all content with and for one another. She wanted us to feel competitive and envious. She remarked that she hoped Anna would be upset with us and perhaps that May wouldn't steal the show when she discovered the due date would come close to the wedding. However, it didn't occur, and May was the only topic of conversation. She said that the fact that a baby who had not yet been born had replaced her as the siblings' unifying element made her feel degraded. When I requested Rick to block her, she continued to type and say additional things. I informed him that she was dangerous for May and us all since she was insane. Seeing such texts has given me a persistent headache. It, unbelievable that a 50-year-old lady is competing against a 7-week-old infant. I find it incomprehensible, and because I'm done with her, it doesn't have to. I'm done defending her actions and attempting to figure out why she did them. I don't care if she ends up in hell. Emma and Anna are also upset after we forwarded the texts to them. Emma stated that she would travel to a facility to have her mother-in-law examined since they believe she may be experiencing a manic episode. I'm not getting involved, but I believe it's an excellent concept. I no longer want to interact with her because of her insane conduct. Our mother-in-law is the subject of a restraining order. We being careful, but she didn't attempt anything else. Emma saw a psychiatrist and a psychologist and had tests done. With my mother-in-law, everything is good. Generalized anxiety disorder was the diagnosis made for her, but that was all. The doctor advised Emma to take her to treatment, stating that there was no underlying medical cause for her conduct. Since then, Emma has not been in touch. She stated that she was prepared to assist if things went wrong, but she can no longer put up with her mother-in-law's hatred. I completely understand and agree with that. If she had a mental illness, I may have sympathized with her and offered help in a few months, but that has now been ruled out. This is who she is, and we know it. With such, there is no reconciliation. For this reason, Rick and I obtained a restraining order. May's safety is the top priority. Additionally, the mother-in-law has twice shown herself to be unsafe. She also harbors animosity for May in particular. We must thus take much greater care to prevent them from coming into contact. I hope I never have anything else to say about this entire experience, and I believe this will be my final post. The family has gone through a lot, so I'm simply thankful that we're all safe. Watch this space for more tales from our journey. Connections.